How do we prepare for what's coming? We all know that things are very tumultuous when it comes to the world stage right now. And in my last video, I talked about how we needed to prepare for lines to be crossed due to the perception of weakness that our country currently has. But as preppers, how do we actually prepare for something like the escalation of global conflict in the future? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about how we're going to prepare, especially when it comes to mindset, for things to fall apart here soon. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about how we're going to prepare for what's coming next. We all can see that the world is in a very chaotic stage right now, and we know things are definitely degrading with our economy on life support and our geopolitical scene basically falling apart right before our eyes. We understand that there's a need to prepare for things to possibly escalate into some kind of a conflict at some point in the future. That's just the state of the world right now, especially in relation to the perception of weakness in our leadership and the strain and desperation that was caused by the economic impact of the previous year. But you're just a person, you're a prepper, you're one person. How do you prepare for something on such a large scale? Well, if you're worried about how you're going to prepare for things like that to unfold here in the near future, then hit the subscribe button below, because let's talk about it and let's try our best to get each other in the right mindset and the right frame of mind to be ready to go when these things eventually happen. They might not happen this year, they might not happen in 10 years, they might not happen for 100 years, but it's pretty much a guarantee that at some point in our future, global conflict will occur once again. And will you be prepared for that to happen? So, what we need to talk about is basically two main subjects. The first one is going to be removing your reliance. What are you reliant on right now that you might not necessarily need to be, okay? Self-sufficiency is extremely important in the sense of preparation. The more self-sufficient you are, the more able you're going to be to basically take a conflict or a challenge about what we're talking about right now and meet it head on and deal with it in the best proper way, okay? So, government assistance. Are you reliant on any sort of government assistance? When I say that, I'm not talking about welfare or financial assistance necessarily, even though that is part of the equation. But what I'm talking about is, are you reliant on the government to solve your problems? Are you reliant on the government to save you in an emergency? Are you reliant on them to defend you from foreign invasion? Are you reliant on them for 911 services if there's an emergency at your home? These are things you need to understand and look at right now. How reliant are you on all of those programs, and do you necessarily need to be part of that right now so that you can phase them out in the sense of how badly you need them? If you feel that you need 911 to get a police officer involved when there's something that you could have handled on your own in the sense of self-defense, if you had the proper training or equipment or whatever it might be, then maybe you need to start looking into what it is you need to acquire rather than worrying about how you're going to dial 911 fast enough when that time comes. All that reliance is going to do is get you less prepared for what could happen in the future when those programs don't exist or aren't capable of meeting the need that might be there during a large-scale emergency, okay? So, the same thing goes for your employment. How reliant on your employment are you right this second? Are you completely screwed if you lose your employment, if you lose your income, if you're not able to pay your bills for, let's say, the period of 2 weeks? Are you drowning at that point? Reliancy on income is part of the way the system works that keeps you in a perpetual mode of labor. And if that is something that you're reliant on in the sense of every 2 weeks you spend your entire paycheck to get you to the next step, then that's something you need to start taking a look at. Of course, some of us are trapped in that situation by no fault of our own, but we can at least take our mindset out of the equation and say, how am I going to improve this situation so that when this employment situation I have that might be considered at some point non-essential or might not exist due to the concept of a global conflict in the future, how are you going to make sure that that's not going to ruin you or put you in a situation of less preparedness than what you have even right now? That is another thing you have to remove some of your reliance from. Relying on your employer or your employment in order to meet all of your needs is not necessarily the definition of being prepared, okay? The same thing goes for the supply chain. Are you relying on the supply chain to feed your family? Are you relying on the supply chain to fuel your generators or your vehicles? Are you relying on the supply chain to acquire everything you need to get by in your daily life? that is something else you have to identify and look at and see how reliant on it you are. If you don't produce any of your own food at all, and you don't have the skills to hunt or scavenge or forage, then are you completely SOL if the supply chain breaks down? If your grocery store runs out of food? Do you have food stored away so that if that does happen, that you can take care of your family until things either return to normalcy or until you figure out a way to continue on without those things in place? So getting rid of the reliance on the supply chain now would help in the future for any kind of a major conflict style event, because with embargoes and with trade wars and with everything else related to a global conflict, you can expect to have shortages, as we've all seen over this last year. And removing your reliance on that supply chain that's very fragile is extremely important to being more prepared, okay? And the same thing goes for technology. How reliant are you on technology just to get through your daily life? Do you need your phone just to find your way around town? Do you need your phone to be entertained or to keep yourself busy for long periods of time? Do you need a computer? Do you need a television? Do you need all those things related to technology? Or do you have the analog versions of those digital items available and useful to you? Do you have experience with them? Do you know how to use a compass and a map? Do you know how to entertain yourself without anything being turned on by electricity? There's a lot of things that go into the reliance on technology, and we all know cyber warfare is going to be a huge part of whatever next conflict might come. And if all of your assets are digital, or if everything is only accessible via the power grid, that is something that you need to be concerned with now, especially if you can't provide your own power. And of course, getting the reliance away from the power grid and being able to either produce your own power or need less power is also very helpful in that situation, because we know EMPs or blackouts of any kind are definitely possible in a conflict as well. Okay, so community is another big one. Okay, so how am I going to say this? Your community, how reliant are you on them? Okay, so and when I say that, what I mean is, like, do you rely on other people to fulfill your basic needs? Now, let's say you're disabled, or let's say that there's a situation in place where you need your family, or you need your friends, or you need outside networks in order to survive based on things that are out of your control. Well, that's something you have to prepare for then. And you have to understand that at the end of the day, those people are going to value their lives and the lives of their immediate families over anyone else's. And if things get too dire, you might be left behind. So prepare now to try to build a larger community, more connections, or more availability for whatever it is you might need in order to survive long term without those people in your life. And at the same time, how reliant are you on other people can definitely make those people change their minds or make decisions based out of that information when that time comes. When there's that emergency, you might be last on the list for who gets supplies or who gets picked up by the vehicle of choice during a bug out scenario, or who knows. Global conflict is going to cause a lot of different issues that we don't know every single parameter of, but what we do know is that people are going to be cutting ties very quickly in order to save their own skin. So how reliant are you on your community? If you need the community, and what I'm saying is not trying to belittle anyone, but if you rely on your local food bank to feed yourself and your family, in a global emergency, that's not going to go very well for very long. So you have to find other ways to find yourself fed, or at least find other networks and other supplies of the same thing that you rely on now in order to have it during those catastrophic events. These are things you have to consider now, and I'm trying to bring it to your attention. I'm not trying to belittle anybody's situation. What I'm trying to do is let you know that, look, there is things we can do right now that we can prepare better for if there ever is some kind of a global emergency. And in my last video, I saw a lot of comments saying, what can I even do about this? What can you even do about global conflict? Once the nukes start flying and once the navies and the air forces start fighting each other, what are we even going to do? Well, these are the things you can start doing now that at least will help soften the blow down the road. Now, that's just talking about reliance. Moving from there, we need to talk about hardening, okay? Are you going to be hardened enough to get through these scenarios? And are you going to make the right decisions and make the right choices so that you can be more resilient for whatever might occur during those times, okay? So the biggest thing about hardening is going to be physical and mental fitness. Now, they're both on par with each other for importance. Physical fitness is going to keep you alive and help you survive longer in the sense of being out amuck, okay? So obviously when things are very dire and when you have to perform, that physical fitness could be the difference of life or death. However, like I said before on reliance, if you are not able to harden in the sense of physical fitness due to disability or whatever it might be, at least you can mentally harden yourself and be prepared for whatever it is you might need to execute in those times. What I mean by that is, are you prepared to be that person that can help organize, that can help communicate, utilize the technology, and do the things that you can actually bring to the table to help the ones who can be more physically fit be successful in whatever their mission goal is? That is something that you need to prepare for. Now, evaluate yourself. Am I physically fit enough? Am I able to get through a scenario without losing my life strictly due to physical fitness? And if I'm not able to be more physically fit than in my current state, how am I going to provide more for the rest of the group? How am I going to put out more energy for everyone else in order to ensure survival for the group? That's another thing that you need to consider. And for those people, I would suggest things like learning how to operate comms, because that could be extremely important and valuable in any kind of an emergency situation. Getting good at organization, running spreadsheets, taking inventories, basically being a quartermaster can be extremely valuable as well. So keep those things in mind. There's still a role and a place for those who aren't necessarily capable of the physical fitness aspect that can still do very important jobs for an entire group or community, okay? So get your physical and your mental fitness in place now, and understand you need to try your best to remove yourself from dependent items such as caffeine or maybe tobacco or whatever it might be that you could lose access to during an event like that. That could make life a lot more difficult trying to adjust at that time rather than now while times are good and there are alternative methods of trying to deal with some of those addictions, okay? So moving on from there, let's talk about defense training. Now, you need to have equipment and you need to learn how to use it, and that can definitely help you in the aspect of being more hardened for a situation to occur. Of course, if there's ever a global conflict, the possibility of a foreign invasion is there. And in that situation, are you capable of defending yourself, your property, or your family, or those you love from whatever that aggressor might be? Or are you completely incapable? Are you at least capable of defending yourself from a robbery or a burglary attempt because people are desperate for supplies and maybe you're the only one on the block that has them? Those are things you need to think about now. If you're not hardened to the point of being able to at least execute basic self-defense functions, that is an issue as well. Something that you should definitely consider. Make sure you have proper equipment, make sure you get proper training, and make sure you're aware of the capability of what you can or can't do, okay? If you know your own capability, that can help save your life as well, all right? You don't want to ever stretch yourself beyond your limitations, because that's a good way to get yourself killed in a situation, okay? There's a great Dirty Harry quote from back in the day, and it's just, a good man knows his limitations. And that is very important because it's true. It keeps you alive by knowing what you can or cannot accomplish. And especially when it comes to self-defense, that is a big issue that a lot of people have grandiose ideas about, okay? So moving on from there, how are you going to harden, okay? Well, and don't screw with this in the comments, please. I already know what's going to happen. But what I'm saying is, get your circle small and vet the people around you, and don't be afraid to cut the fat, okay? Now that sounds very cold, and that sounds like anti-community, but in reality, you're always as weak as your weakest link. And if your weakest link is actually putting you in the red, rather than maybe even just being neutral at zero, that is something you need to figure out right now and take care of immediately. You do not want to have to deal with that person or that toxicity or that cancer during a situation of emergency when things are heightened, tensions are there, and people are scared and anxious and looking to somebody like you for leadership. That person is going to become a problem no matter what, because if they're a problem now in your life, in modern times with modern technology and all of the luxuries that we enjoy currently, they're going to be a much worse problem during an emergency. Do not expand your circle just because. You want to make sure that you keep things tight and that you understand that the people that you're putting your trust into and the people you're relying on are there to have your back and help bail you out of an emergency just as much as you're there for them. And if that's not the case, if that's not how the equation adds up, you might want to consider what you can or can't get away with in the sense of cutting the fat now. Of course, some of us have family and blood that we can't necessarily just leave behind, and I completely understand that, and that's not what I'm trying to advocate. But what I'm saying is, you don't have to associate with every single person you come across. That person you're associating with might become an issue for you down the road, especially during the time of global emergency, and it's not worth the hassle if it doesn't need to be. So, small circles, keep it tight, And that's how you harden. You surround yourself with capable people who bring something to the table that are also hardened as well. And that's how you survive in the sense of community. That's how you survive in the sense of being alone. That's how you survive in general during some kind of an event like that. I didn't want to come on here and tell everybody, well, if you buy this thing, you'll survive World War III, right? That's not the point of this conversation. I'm trying to get you in the right mindset so that you can see what's on the horizon. We can all see what's happening around the world. People are posturing. Leadership is extremely weak right now, and who knows what's going to happen soon. But these are things you need to consider now, that you can prepare for now, that don't cost any money. A lot of the things I'm talking about just require you to be in the right mindset, okay? So, if you have any questions or you want to add anything in the comments below, please do. Let us know what your thoughts are. Let me know if there's other things that I should be considering in the sense of reliance, in the sense of hardening, in the sense of other topics of preparation that can help keep everybody alive during some kind of a global conflict. It's definitely something that we have to consider, and things just keep seemingly getting worse. So, if you have anything else for me at all, let me know in the comments. But besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.